Bam! Look at these.
Ooh.
Look at these friends.
We're on.
Thank
We're
you
good.
so much for waiting.
We're happy.
Hell yeah. We are live.
So while you guys are just joining us, I would like to reintroduce Stefan Kurpinsky, who
Hi, friends.
veteran bartender. We've been working with him. He's amazing. This is our friend Brandon Curry, who has been in the industry for how many years, Brandon?
Oh man, it's probably been 11 now.
11 years. He made his, earlier on in your career, you were working as a sommelier.
Sommelier. Well, I started off as a back waiter. I started off bussing tables, and then worked my way up to a server. Then got into a sommelier, and then into bartending, and then I got approached by Silencio to sling some mezcal, and here we are.
That's really
Fast
cool.
forward a couple years.
Yeah. So I've been with Silencio now for 3 years, and
Silencio is a
it's
great
been-
mezcal
yeah.
if you've never had it. That's what's in my Negroni. We're doing mezcal Negroni for me. Which
Yeah,
is great.
for you,
Yeah.
you all, we're making a classic equal parts gin Negroni, but feel free to get inventive. We're going to talk
Is that a
about
new
it.
bottle?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that's the...
that's the OG. That's the ensemble.
I never owned that one myself.
Well, you will today.
Okay, well, not sad.
For what you're probably more familiar with.
Obviously, the problem is Rachel is not there. Rachel is not here this week.
Right, yes.
We are going to have a great time in her honor, but thank you for joining us anyway.
I already missed her.
I do too.
Oh man, I saw
She's
her just for a
she's
moment.
about this. Is that right?
This-
No, she's taller than that.
this
It's
much
like
taller?
this. Yeah.
We'll get you a stool.
I just jumped on the
We'll
internet.
get you a
I'm never doing that again. Or I'll do it again. All right.
Show me the pessimize for you.
Yes, mezcal Negronis are delicious. That's what I'm having. The El Silencio makes a really fantastic one. You get a really nice kind of acidic, smoky goodness. Perfect for a Negroni. You know we love botanists around here, especially because Karen left the bottle a couple weeks ago.
Whoops.
Thanks, Karen. Yahtzee.
John Schmidt, you already drank yours? You better get on it, dude.
Yeah. I'm assuming if you drank one, you've got the ingredients to make a second. We're gonna have to stir down this rock. It's a little too big.
You can't just stir it a little bit?
No, we're going. Yeah, I'm gonna stir it down.
I was gonna say if you stir it a little, it might go down.
Hey, thanks everybody. Appreciate that. Anybody commenting that same thing right now, or what's the deal?
Yeah, what do you guys think?
Hey, can you give this a stir real quick? Can I get a stir, please? The peanut gallery.
So what are you guys using for your gin? Or your mezcal? Or whatever it is you're using for your base spirit? Tell us in the chat.
Tell us in the comments below. What's up, guys?
It's been a while since I've had a gin Negroni.
So you
used to the
you
mezcal.
straight up defaulted to mezcal. You switched teams because
I
you're.
did.
I mean I'm not mad at you, but what's wrong with gin? Why you gotta hate gin?
Well,
Gin's
so
delicious.
if I can share a story,
Sure.
the first experience I had with a Negroni was at a very, very old school bar in Santa Monica called the Galley. It's one of the oldest restaurants in LA. And I was with a friend of mine who was probably like 20 years my senior, and I was like 21, 22 years old. And he's like, wait here, I'm going to go to the bar, I'm going to try something. So I'm just like sitting there, twiddling my thumbs, whatever, and he comes back, and he presents me with a Negroni. And the first sip I took, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is like it tastes like a pine tree.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is this? And then he's like, wait, try it again.
Yeah.
And it was the second sip that, like, I got all those subtle notes of, like, the bitterness and the sweetness and the booze and the juniper and, like, everything that was going on in that cocktail. It was like that moment from Ratatouille, right? When he's like, try this mushroom, try this cheese, but now try them together, and then everything, like, explodes on the screen.
Nice.
And that was the moment for me where I was like, I'm absolutely in love with this cocktail, and I've been in love with the Negroni ever since. It was like I did not know that anything could taste like that. Because I grew up in Nebraska.
So it was a
and
new flavor paradigm.
It really was, yeah. Like I grew up in Nebraska, so my experience with drinking up until I moved to California was like Smirnoff and like Bud Light and whatever cheap shit we could get from the liquor store. And then when I moved to California when I was 18, it was like house parties. So it was like Dole Pineapple and like whatever booze that whoever had in their parents' cabinet. So like yeah. And then so once I started getting into like actual cocktails, the Negroni was my first experience with like a legit.
Yeah, I think
classic
a lot
cocktail,
of people
so
either experience their first classic cocktail as something like the old fashioned or something like
yeah.
this.
No, for me it was a Negroni.
My first Negroni was at the Gold Dust in San Francisco, where I'm from, on Powell Street. Total dive. I miss it terribly. It's gone. It shouldn't be the first place you have a Negroni, but it was. But that's it speaks to
why? Because it was divier, or because
it's so divey that you would just be like you're just drinking whiskey ginger, right? Like that's the play, or like a high life. But the old Gold Dust was this really rad, fabulous place on Powell, like in Union Square, so like super tourist trap area. But then there was this dope little dive bar that just outlasted everything for the longest time until it's probably like a H&M now or something. But
unfortunately,
yeah, like it does speak to the Negroni, and something really fantastic about it is that you can literally have it everywhere, right? Obviously, you can have it at a cocktail bar, and it'll be served something like this on a beautiful hand-cut rock with perfectly garnished, perfectly balanced, jiggered out. Like
it really was. If I could just interrupt, it really was perfectly garnished and perfectly balanced.
Mine wasn't.
It was.
So wait,
I grew up. I spent a year in Florence, Italy, which is actually the birthplace of the Negroni. Didn't have a Negroni there, right? Like I went to school there for a year, studying art history, and I would drink Campari sodas that are actually like you can crack them in a bottle, like in the park, like pre-made, like the original RTD cocktail. So you could we would play, soccer with like these little kids, and they would just destroy us, like running circles around us through our legs the whole bit, just destroying us, Americans. But so I definitely had Campari, since I was 21, 22, sipping on that. But this is obviously way more advanced. There's a lot more nuance and definitely more complex flavors. But yeah, when I first had it at the Gold Dust, I was like, this is everything I love about a Campari soda, but with so much more, and it's so much more round. And what's great about is that you can have it at the Gold Dust. You can have it at, the diviest dive bar. Every big city's got Star Bar. They're not affiliated, but every bar, there's a bar called Star Bar in every big city, right? We had one here in San Diego. There's one in Denver. That's amazing. Highly recommend. Go to Jurassic Tiki. It's amazing. But yeah, you can have it at the diviest dive bar because these three ingredients, equal parts, roughly, right? Like if you don't have a jigger, you can just like a bartender can make it work. And these three ingredients are in every bar. You might have a dusty bottle of Campari on the back shelf, but sure that you have a regular that probably orders it on the rocks or on soda. You probably have a bottle of vermouth in the fridge, like sticky, like with the
hopefully.
Hopefully.
Fingers
it's probably
crossed.
old. It might be the dry vermouth Noli Prat that you've had since the 80s, but you definitely have a vermouth, and you definitely have a gin. So you can make this cocktail anywhere, and it will be pretty darn delicious. And because it's an equal parts drink, it's pretty hard to really screw up. And also, because there's a high Brix level, right? There's a fair amount of sugar in both Campari and sweet vermouth.
Yep.
Everything's equal parts. There's acidity in both Campari and sweet vermouth. You end up with this really rounded, balanced drink that can handle like a pretty wide array of dilution. Like we've talked for a couple weeks on this live stream about dilution and really nailing dilution because it's super important for the martini to make sure it's a little over diluted and super cold. We've talked about it with the old fashioned, of not over diluting that old fashioned, otherwise you lose the nuance, you lose like the whiskey element. It just tastes like whiskey flavored water. But with the Negroni, you can serve it on this beautiful hand cut rock. You can serve it on like ice that you have from your freezer, as long as it doesn't smell and taste like the bolognese you froze a week ago. And you can also serve it on like the chippiest hotel ice that you get at the hotel. Like if you're grabbing the ice bucket full, You can make this in your
Stanley
room
Tucci.
at the hotel. Yeah, you can pebble ice, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. The amount of dilution that this cocktail can handle is about as much as you can get, right? Like, without it being a long drink or a tiki drink. Like, this can handle. Obviously, it's not as perfect, but you can get away with it and have a great cocktail just by trying to measure out equal parts and just putting some water in.
That's actually true. I've never compared how the martini is build it how you like it, and this one is kind of like build it however, and then try it another way because it's probably going to work.
Yeah, I mean those three ingredients just work really well together.
They really do, and you can sub out different ingredients too. You know, like you can do gin, you can do mezcal, like tequila. You can do, and then if you do vodka, I prefer switching out Aperol for Campari. But there's there's a lot of different ways that you can sub out different aperitivos or different amaros, like for the Campari, or you can sub out there's so many. Like the beautiful thing about vermouth is where it comes from, like how it's made. There's so many different ways that you can craft the perfect Negroni according to whatever palate you have, right? Like vermouth in and of itself is a whole nother podcast, but yeah, then like with your base spirit, you can do vodka, you can do gin, you can do mezcal, you can do tequila, you can do rye, like the Boulevardier,
100%.
There's so
There's
many different
something
ways
said for that, right? Like I think the bartender's Boulevardier is not an equal parts drink. It's a 1.5 part whiskey to 3/4 part of the other two, Campari and vermouth.
Yeah,
generally
that's how I prefer it with mezcal too.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you want something that's a little less sweet, a little drier, and a little more spirit forward, give that 1.5, 3/4 recipe a try. I think you're gonna really enjoy that. That's what also is great. And then you can also, if you're not really into sweet things and the Negroni tastes a little sweet to your palate, sub it out for a Blanc vermouth first because that's a little less sweet. And then if that still doesn't work for you, sub it out for a dry vermouth. If that still doesn't work, sub it out for Fino Sherry, which is an amazing cocktail. So yeah, you can have a lot of fun with the Negroni because of the nature of the drink. It's not infallible, and I'm reading the comments, and I agree. Obviously, really bad ice, over diluted, is not going to make the best Negroni. But I'm just saying that this, out of all the cocktails that you can make at home, this one pretty much is about as hard to really totally screw up as possible.
Yeah, like it has the most grace.
Yes,
it really does.
It is. Yeah. It totally is. It's like. It's not tuned perfectly, but it's good enough for jazz, for jazz.
Actually, I was gonna say I'd love to try. What I haven't done yet with the Negroni ever is a mezcal Negroni, but do a split base with the vermouth portion and do like equal parts. I mean, not equal parts, but split the base between the vermouth and the Mr. Black. So
yeah, that
would be great.
One of my favorite things to do with the Negroni is to obviously you get to have fun and if we go back to like the Death and Company like idea of 4 ways to make your own cocktail out of a classic, and the one that's really easy is like the Mr. Potato Head or the split base, right? Like those are the two that most people think of and the easiest to remember. Like, oh, just split the base. Like if you like gin and mezcal, you could do that, right? Or rum and mezcal, you could do that, whatever. But also you can just swap stuff out. The Mr. Potato Head. So one of my favorite Negronis is either mezcal or an agricole rum, and instead of using a sweet vermouth, using a Blanc vermouth, and instead of using Campari, using Cocchi Americano Bianco, which I think is an incredible Negroni, and it's not quite what you would experience because Cocchi is not a perfect facsimile to Campari. It's actually a better facsimile to what Lillet used to be, like Kina Lillet. It's more bitter than Lillet, but it's not as bitter as Campari. But that's the great thing about aperitivo style cocktails is that you can really dig in and once you understand the balance of it, like a Negroni, you can really get, you can have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of people drinking with,
Yeah, right?
Monkey
I
47.
I have not had one with pins before. So that would be really fun to.
I've never done a Negroni with Monkey 47, to be honest.
That is a great Negroni.
John Schmidt killing it over there.
Yeah.
Bougie.
Yeah, a little bougie, but
You're bougie.
But it is delicious.
Yeah, usually I would do a martini or I would just sip that. But
yeah.
I wouldn't.
Aquavit,
I wouldn't do
Daniel,
that.
that's a great Negroni, man. You have a favorite Aquavit that you've been rocking?
Actually, I've got some for that Ren gave us.
Oh, really? Ren
Okay.
Ren gave you one. Like a
This
little
guy.
bottle of something. There you go. Ahus Aquavit.
Okay.
I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. I'm not Scandinavian.
Huh.
Aquavit is rad, right? You've got like kind of a, rye bread, like dill funkiness going on. So yeah, you can like get really creative with that. And you can also, that can be a really savory experience too, which would be great with food. And Negroni is great with food in general, but
Robert, Sotol works really, really well too.
Yeah.
In my experience, the Sotols that I've had from Durango have like almost like a chocolatey note to them. So the chocolate notes in Sotol actually go really, really well in Negroni.
of course.
It's going to be more expensive, but yeah, the flavor is like absolutely spot on. So definitely good call with that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's also important just to talk about aperitivos in general and like where they came from. We usually do get into some sort of historic facts about the cocktails that we're talking about. And the Negroni has like, I think we've talked about this before, but like cocktails and drinking history is not super like defined. It's really fuzzy, right? Because people are drinking and then they're trying to write it down later. And then you get brands involved and they have their own crazy stories that are usually way more convoluted than how it actually happened.
Yeah.
But the Negroni, it's pretty much been, I think it's accepted that the Negroni was invented in the mid 1800s to late 1800s in Florence, Italy. And it was born out of the aperitivo cafe culture in northern Italy, in Milano and Florence and Bologna Bologna, all these different places that have like big squares with cafes. Cafes you go to drink in the afternoon and have aperitivo. Bars you actually go to in the morning and have coffee. That's just part of Italian culture. But obviously they sell coffee at cafes as well. Obviously, the name cafe would show you that. So yeah, I mean, there's like the Wikipedia story about how Count Negroni asked for a very specific aperitivo cocktail that was a very minor variation on another cocktail. Basically adding gin to an Americano and then getting rid of the soda and ending up with a Negroni and named it after himself. That sounds really great and like neat and tidy. It sounds really good on Wikipedia. It's probably not true. I think that the Negroni was born all over northern Italy and then was eventually named for somebody or had just been named. But it's important to know that it belongs in this category of aperitivo style cocktails because its base spirit really, although it's equal parts, is really Campari. Campari is the one that kind of dominates the cocktail. As much as you taste the juniper from the gin, you taste like some of the like the Italian herbs and the vermouth. Like the Campari, when you put it in anything, is going to kind of dominate. So yeah, it's in an aperitivo for sure, and it like is in that. It's in the old-fashioned variation, obviously, because of the spirit, water, bitter, sugar component. But yeah, if you think of it being an aperitivo, that you can anything with some sort of aperitivo that's bitter, and anything else is really going to be in the Negroni family. So you got the Americano, you got the Sbagliato, you got the Scroppino, you got all these cocktails that are the bicicletta that are in that environment. So yeah, I think you really have fun with it. If you like the Negroni, you can just riff off it for days.
Yeah,
which we're gonna
There's
do.
endless possibilities.
Yeah.
While he makes this next drink, and he can tell us what he's going to do, does anyone have any questions or anything that you want to go over? Please drop it in the chat.
Yeah.
Where are you tuning in from, and what else are you splitting your bases of? Tell us.
If I can answer Tom's question really quick. So Sotol is technically not an agave.
Mm-hmm.
Sotol is made from a plant called the desert spoon. Most prominent in Durango, but it's also made in several different states as well. Chihuahua, Sonora.
Mm-hmm.
But the most accessible is Durango. And so the sugars that you use for fermentation and distillation are actually located at the base of the leaves instead of the piña, just technically like the heart of the agave. And so it's made the same way that mezcal is. So it's roasted underground, and then it is fermented and then distilled with natural yeast. So they don't use any proprietary strain. There's no there's no label on the yeast strain. It's all just like what's naturally occurring in the air. And it has a slightly different flavor profile from what mezcal would be. Typically, I get like more of an herbaceous and like chocolate note, and like maybe like a little bit more grassy note, because again, like it's not the heart of the plant; it's the base of the leaf. So you're always going to get a little bit more of that like vegetal kind of grassy note from Sotol. But it is beautiful if you can find it. Like I don't know where you are, Tom, but like go to any mezcal bar. They typically have at least one or two Sotols, and it's really a beautiful experience. So,
should we talk a little bit about mezcal in general, since we
please.
we have
the mezcal
we have
master
the
here.
mezcal man here, and we're all sipping on mezcal Negronis today
yeah,
Let's put
in Southern California.
Well, I guess if I can kind of like my first introduction to mezcal was at a tequila bar, and buddy was like, "Hey, have you had this before?" And no, but I'm down to try it. And when I first had mezcal, the only thing I could taste was the smoke. Right. So the biggest difference between tequila and mezcal is that mezcal is roasted underground for 4 to 6 days, the same way that you would make like barbacoa or any kind of meat that you would cook underground. It takes a lot longer to make, but the resulting flavor is so much more complex. With tequila, what you do is you typically cook the piñas or the heart of the agave with steam. Right, so tequila is going to have a cleaner flavor, a brighter flavor. Mezcal is going to be a little bit more like earthy, smoky. More of your like secondary flavors are going to be, limestone, a little bit of floral notes depending on the type of agave. But mezcal is much older than tequila. There was a recent archaeological discovery that predated Spanish colonization of Mexico. Which is really, really amazing. Like it's been around for a very, very long time.
It's ancestral. It's an ancestral.
It is,
spirit.
yeah. It's a very, very ancient spirit. But yeah, the main difference is the way that the agaves are cooked. So if you try mezcal for the first time, you're just gonna get smoke probably. But then it's that second sip that you really start picking up on the complexity and the beauty of what mezcal is. And I would argue that mezcal is the most complex spirit in the world. And yeah, I've been with El Silencio for 3 years now, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. I absolutely love it, and I love mezcal. So I'm going to be preaching that gospel until the day I die.
Yeah, mezcal, like it's still made even like you guys are making a lot of mezcal, but even still, it's made in the way it's been made forever, and there is a process that is so like tied to the land, into the terroir of Mexico, that I can't think of, save for maybe some agricole rum. I don't know of another spirit that is so terroir driven than mezcal.
It really is, yeah.
I mean, like you get different piscos, they're going to taste totally different. I guess maybe piscos from Peru as well, like single estate piscos. Yeah. But you get like where bourbon, because of the definition of the DO of bourbon, like you get a pretty similar flavor profile from like super high end to medium grade to whatever, right? Because it has to be a certain amount of corn. It's all coming from a very similar region. There's usually a limestone water element. Like things are pretty like set in stone. Like you get some weeded bourbons that are slightly different, more fruity, but generally bourbon tastes like bourbon. Yeah. Rum, because it's made in so many different islands in the Caribbean, what have you, and beyond. You get some variation of flavor there by distillation methods, where they're grown, the barrels they use, whatever, and and they don't have as many regulations on it, so they can do other things to it that'll change the flavor. But mezcal specifically, every single one you pick up is going to taste different, and it's one of my favorite things about mezcal is that even if you're using the same species of agave, even if you're in the same region of Oaxaca or one of the states down there that produce mezcal, you're going to get, there's a house flavor involved, there's natural yeast strains, there's all these variables that make it super terroir driven, and I love that about mezcal.
Yeah, there's so many endless possibilities, from like how close to the piña you want to shave the leaves off, like the pencas or like the spikes from the agave plant, to whatever season you're actually making mezcal. So you can make mezcal the exact same way in the spring and the fall, and depending on the agriculture that's being grown in the area, you're going to have completely different types of yeast and it'll taste completely different. And it's like it's not only the agave species, but it's the terroir, it's the soil, but it's really beautiful. Like if you've ever had a tepezate, they tend to be a little bit more grassy, but they also take 25 years to mature, up to 30 sometimes. But
even Espadín is what? How long?
Espadín is like 7 to 9, so it's around the same as what Blue Weber is for tequila, right? So Espadín is the most common type of agave used for mezcal production, and most of that is based in the state of Oaxaca. But then you have your wild varietals. You know, you have Tobala, you have Jabali, you have Tepezate, you have the Quiche family. You have so many different wild species that you actually have to go up into the mountains and harvest. And again, like you can make mezcal the exact same way, and it could turn out completely different depending on what the mezcalero wants to do, depending on the amount of like heat during fermentation. There's so many different variables that make mezcal as beautiful and as variant as it is.
Wow. And there's low smoke mezcals too. Like
there are
mezcals that are less smoky, because obviously there are like a few flavors in this world that some people are just like, nope, that's not for me. And smoke, for whatever reason, is one of those you love it or you hate it. There's very few people in between. Like, yeah, I could take or leave smoke. Yeah. But even if you're really not into smoke, there are plenty of mezcals out there that are really low on that flavor profile. They could be more mineral driven. They could be more citrusy. So I think like if you've had one bad mezcal, you shouldn't like let that ruin your experience with mezcal. I also like to always talk about, especially when we're talking about gin cocktails, and now we're like totally down the mezcal train, which is but there's a reason for that. There's totally a reason for that.
The Negroni morphed.
Well, but there's a reason for that. For me, except for the Ramus Gin Fizz, which does not work with mezcal. I've tried 100 ways from Sunday.
I've had a good one.
Okay, well, I would like to try that one. Generally, they haven't worked for me. Just about any like classic gin cocktail can be ridiculously delicious with mezcal. Yeah. Every single one. They do a similar thing on your palate once they're in a cocktail. Obviously, totally different thing, right? Like smoked agave, like roasted agave versus a base spirit that's like super neutral that has a bunch of herbs and botanicals and juniper. But they end up doing something. They both do really magical things in the cocktail. So I highly recommend, if you have a favorite gin cocktail and you have a bottle of mezcal that you enjoy drinking, substitute it out. Give it a try.
We've got a couple things here. Well, first of all, Daniel Copeland is frozen in Austin. Dude,
man, I'm sorry.
We're sending
Daniel.
you love.
Oh, man.
We're sending you love.
Sorry, Daniel.
I'm so sorry. I hope you're doing okay. I hope
I'm
you
sure
have
that
food.
His cocktails were super chilled and delicious tonight.
Having a Negroni to stay
Definitely.
warm.
Yeah. No, right.
The other thing is we've got a couple questions about backhanded pouring.
Ooh.
You want to cover that? Because they noticed you did that today and last week.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So obviously the most crucial thing when you're playing with jiggers is to get your measurement right, which usually involves holding the jigger as level as possible. But from there, it doesn't matter which way you go, as long as you get it into the glass and you don't spill it. And I think for me, as a bartender, I was
/ photographer / videographer.
But now
I'm thinking about the camera.
Screw it now. But like,
okay, fair
when
enough.
no. When I was bartending for 20 years in the well every night, and I think a lot of people at home can understand, if you do anything for that long, there's a repetitive motion, possibility for injury there. Whether you're clicking, and I'll be honest, like I've been clicking the mouse a lot lately, and this hurts. This hurts so much that I'm like on my phone, and this hurts. I don't know how, but like there's something about it is that you need to vary up your motion. So for me, the backhand came from, if I were to just do this every time, that same motion was going to hurt over time. So I would actually like halfway through my shift, I'd switch to left-handed. That way I'm using a different hand to do that. And then it started being like, now I can go this way, I can go this way, depending on mostly where the bottle is underneath, like where you can't see right now. Because if I'm coming in this way, I'm going that way. If I'm coming in this way, I'm going that way. It just helps vary up the motion.
Actually, it does more than that. I'm a little bit of a nerd, and the neurologists actually talk a lot about one of the best things you can do in the morning is to do something with your non-dominant hand.
Totally.
So, like, as an example, brush your teeth with your opposite hand. Like, I usually use my right. Brush your teeth with your left hand. What it does is it engages your brain in a way that actually triggers a lot of your neurons to fire that don't normally fire. So you're aware in a way that you wouldn't normally be. So mid-shift, if you're doing that, you're actually waking up your brain in ways like.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. I mean, it would be so. My father did this to me. He'd tell me to try everything left-handed. Just try it left-handed. You know, I'm right-handed.
Why not?
He's a southpaw.
But I did learn how to play guitar right-handed.
Right.
I'm lefty too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What am I doing over here, ambidextrous? I gotta go.
That's good. Yeah,
You use your right hand, get the fuck out.
Or you should stay in the middle.
Yeah,
Just stay in the middle.
right? Yeah, but like my father at an early age, because he was a basketball player at like the collegiate level, he was like, just try left hand, just try left hand. And it would frustrate the hell out of me, but I am thankful for him making me do that because now I'm able to do a lot of stuff using both hands. But yeah, going back to I mean, obviously there's style points there, I guess. Probably at some point I was like, let me just see if I can hit the line or whatever. But for the most part, it's just varying up my movement.
I mean, like, but to get back to your point, I think, you know, when you're bartending, it is a stage, right? Like it's a theater. So like, yeah, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like it's really about the show. So,
no, totally.
Like,
and I think that was reinforced.
About, like,
you learn different ways to pour stuff, and people are like, wow, it's just fun to watch you work. And you're like, cool. Awesome.
Like, yeah, I'm also taking care of my body at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Like I think we haven't gotten to the shaken cocktails yet on this live stream, but when we get there, I'm going to start talking about getting your core engaged and knitting in your ribs so you don't hurt yourself. And breathing. What else we got going on? Did we talk about like the ages, like the age statements in Mexico? Because they're totally different than like if people are used to translating to whiskey. I think that'd be kind of a fun thing because I mean mezcals are like there's aged and rested mezcals too, right?
There's very few brands that do aged mezcals.
What's like their max aging?
There's añejos out there. I don't know if I've ever seen an extra añejo, to be honest. There's reposados and añejos.
I think you see more like añejo mezcal in Mexico.
Yeah, it's not super common in the States, but what I typically tell people when it comes to aging mezcal is imagine you wake up next to the most beautiful person you've ever seen in your entire life, and that person doesn't have any makeup on, is just like exactly who they are, first thing in the morning, no makeup, no frills, no anything. Like that to me is what mezcal is. Like it's the beauty is there already. The beauty is like that moment when you open up your eyes and you're like, oh my god, like this is perfect. And then a reposado would be like after that person kind of like showered and got ready and you guys got lunch or whatever. And then añejo would be like, all right, we're going to the club. We're doing this. But like,
it's the club lighting, right?
Yeah.
Like it puts all.
But it's it adds more to it. But I think the beauty of what mezcal is that like pure unadulterated moment, and it's just like there's nothing, there's no makeup on it. There's no addition. It's just like that pure beauty for what it is. And I think there's so much labor and love that goes into mezcal that you don't need the extra makeup. You don't.
There's
need
also
anything
a way
else.
higher.
There's
a way higher sugar content in agave than there is in grains.
Yeah.
And it's easy. It's way easier to access too. It's like it's already exposed as sugar. Like you can roast it and bring it out more, right? Caramelize it. And use the Maillard reaction to enhance like the sugary goodness in agave.
You don't need
you don't actually really need to. Like if you like wrang out agave, it would taste sweet. Like if I chew on some rye that hasn't been cooked, it doesn't taste sweet to me. It tastes like really dry, spicy rye bread, right? Like, so there is obviously like corn's different, right? Like bourbons are way sweeter than rye for that purpose. Is that there's a higher sugar content.
And the sugars themselves are more complex than agave spirits, so it actually takes the human body longer to break those sugars down. So typically with a perennial crop like corn or barley or whatever, the human body absorbs those sugars differently than they do agave.
Can we talk about how awesome mezcal-based gins are? Because that's like the best of both worlds. Yeah, like just throw some juniper and a couple of like citrus peels and stuff into and a couple herbs into mezcal, and you got something. That's
really
the
cool
best
stuff.
of both worlds, right? Because we're talking about a gin cocktail this week, and we also are talking about our love for our mezcal version of this gin cocktail. But yeah, I think that's a fun one too. There's a couple out there that you can look for if you really love both worlds to kind of play around. How's everybody doing out there?
We're doing pretty
Daniel's
good.
doing well. He's chilly, but
Good.
You guys got power, hopefully.
Are you putting your bottles out in the snow?
Yeah, I would.
I would.
While we're waiting for a
Like,
response,
all right, well, we don't have power. So
what are some things that you could compromise in Negroni and definitely not compromise? Like maybe like which aperitivo or
I mean,
which
I've pretty
sweet
much.
component?
I'm on the record saying that you can pretty much get away with with murder with the Negroni. You could shake it and still have a cocktail that's drinkable. I mean, I wouldn't prefer that. I wouldn't drink that at home, but you can get away with it. To be honest, the back of this Campari label that has it's had the recipe for Negroni on it forever. Before they established Campari America in this big conglomerate, it actually the recipe used to call for a shaken Negroni. You could do that, and it would still be tasty. I think it's really important not to take cocktails too seriously. But at the same time, if you're looking to get the best out of something, I would really concentrate on, like your favorite gin or mezcal or base spirit. I think that's super important, like to your taste, what you like to drink. Having a higher end vermouth, I think, is super important. We're using Carpano Antica. There's a higher amount of sugar in this than most sweet vermouths that I think plays really well in a Negroni, and it plays really well in a Manhattan too. It's on the higher end of the vermouth spectrum, but like Dolene sweet vermouth works, Mancino. There's a lot of really good ones out there, but I would just make sure you get something of quality, and that after you've opened it, you refrigerated it to make sure it doesn't get oxidized, because wine will oxidize. It's already oxidized wine, but it can get worse. And then just, like concentrate on how much dilution you like. The rest of it's really to taste, in my opinion.
And if you are going to serve it up, make sure you dilute it a little bit more than if you were going to put it on the rocks. But I know you guys have talked about that before, so.
We have talked about it. We like dilution around here.
Yep.
All right, you guys. Well, we're getting toward the end here. If you guys have any more questions, we'd love to take them. If not, we're gonna probably say goodbye in just about a few minutes.
This is an Americano variation. It's like a Negroni Americano play. An Americano is like the precursor to a Negroni. Basically, no gin, just the vermouth and Campari with soda water. This is actually El Silencio mezcal, Mr. Black, cold brew liqueur, and Campari, and I just filled it up with soda water. It's freaking delicious. You try it.
It's amazing.
It's refreshing.
It's really good.
So have fun with it. And then there's the Sbagliato, which is it loosely translated as the mistake in Italian. But somebody accidentally put Prosecco in place of gin, and they're like, oh, fuck, I'm so sorry, this Sbagliato. It's really delicious. It's a great brunch version of a Negroni.
It's really good.
Like I've already talked about the Bicicletta and the Rosetta. There's a bunch of great Negroni variations. Search them. Have fun with it. We'll probably cover a few of them here on this channel going forward.
Orange peel versus lemon
peel. I mean, classic is orange with Campari, but I mean, you can do whatever you like. Lemon's great too. It's just going to be a little bit brighter than the orange. You have it.
I was just looking at the comments. John and Hugh, like, Cochi Torino is my favorite vermouth to use.
So good.
Negroni. It is like
that's this on steroids.
Yeah, I've made so many different Negroni variations, and Cochi Torino is by far my favorite. It's insane. But yeah, I mean, I think I prefer. I've had it with orange, lemon, and grapefruit. I gotta go with the classic. I think orange is my favorite. It's still like, the grapefruit and the lemon are just a little bit more bitter, which the Campari already provides that. So I think like the orange is a little bit more. It mellows everything out.
I agree.
My only thing is like don't rub it around the top of the glass. Just rub around like the mid side, and just expel the oils. You don't want to be sipping on like the actual oils like on the rim of your glass.
You want to smell it.
You want to be able to smell it. Like it's more of an aroma thing. Mm-hmm. So don't rub the orange around the top of the rim, but you can rub it
just
on
the
like
Negroni or for any cocktail.
I would say for any cocktail, because you don't want to sip the oils of the pith are like really bitter. So I would either rub it around like the middle of your glass, or just expel it and then either drop it in or discard it.
Well, it depends on how much pith you have too. But yeah, if you have a lot of that white You definitely want to keep it away from your actual palate because it can actually be numbing, which obviously is not what you want, right? You don't want to numb your palate when you're trying to taste the cocktail.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. It's a really good point. Just be careful where those oils are, and make sure they're more fragrant than they are like you're tasting it, right?
Yeah.
Next week we're going to be doing the sidecar, which is it's a great cocktail, and I think that people don't really appreciate it as much as it should because it's a cognac cocktail. But people drink sidecars or daisies all the time, right? Like talking about agave spirits, we're drinking margaritas in Southern California year round, and it's one of the most ordered cocktails on the universe. So, I mean, the sidecar is a really seminal cocktail, in my opinion, because it was the first daisy to really be done correctly with the right balance. There were cocktails previous to the sidecar that are similar that have gone out of favor because they're not right. They're out of balance. The Crusta comes to mind. That's a sidecar, that's the sidecar's grandfather.
The sugar rim.
Yeah, I mean the sugar rim's beautiful. The garnish is beautiful, but the cocktail is terrible. It's just out of balance. It's just boozy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited about that.
Yeah.
One more question. I feel like Koki BDT's recipe flavor profile changed in the last 2 to 3 years. You guys think that's true?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's true. I think the wine is younger than it used to be. So
Maybe their demand went up and
100%. But that's just going to happen. It's cyclical too, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we've talked about this, but even like agave prices are out of control right now because the demand's high, and then people will move on to a different spirit. Whiskey will come back, or whatever, like rums or vodka, and then agave prices will come back down, and then people get excited about it again because it's cheap, and they want to start drinking tequila and mezcal, and it goes up. Like so, everything's cyclical. So, I mean, the cognacs we drink today are about 10 years younger than they used to be, 100 years ago. So, I mean, it's all cyclical. So, yeah, it has changed a little bit. But we talked about last week with the Sazerac, the Peychaud's recipe has changed drastically, you know?
Yeah.
You just have, and that's something that's really important is that you do acknowledge that, Eric. You've experienced that, and you maybe have to adjust your specs a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you have to work with what's available, right?
Yep.
Like
obviously, you're not going to recreate that. At home. I've tried.
Exactly.
It's hard.
So,
you guys, thank you so much for being here.
yeah.
We had a great time.
Thanks for waiting through our
Our technical difficulties.
oh man, it was brutal today. So
And honestly, thank you guys both for having me.
Thank you for being
three
here.
cheers for having
Yeah.
Brandon back.
An honor and a
Agave
privilege.
Spirits, yeah.
Thank you guys.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers,
Have a good
brother.
one.
Yeah, bye. Bye. Bye-bye now.